And also, I just think they make really wonderful worlds, and the more time I can spend in these worlds, the better. But why, hello there. It is 219 days until Elden Ring comes out on January 21st, 2022, and this is the Elden Wait. And if you were returning, you may be like, whoa, I thought the Elden Wait was over because we got information. The Elden Wait is until Elden Ring is released. And because I'm still waiting for Elden Ring, and I still, more than ever, would love to talk about it. And if you're just tuning in now, what I do for the Elden Wait is a more casual discussion about Elden Ring and, maybe how it relates to Souls games, but just generally talking. And what I'm sort of using this going forward is this is the first time I've released the Elden Wait since the gameplay trailer dropped. What I did was I did the Elden Ring So Far series, which is for me is more the conclusions I've come to, more factual collecting of information, and getting that out there all organized. And this is a little bit looser, sort of a place where I can come to like workshop ideas or talk about various topics, or great for news about the game. And man, there has been a lot of news about the game. And what I wanted to talk to today relates to some of the interviews that have come out from Miyazaki this week. On Monday, a bunch of interviews dropped. And what I wanted to discuss today is just the idea of the Tarnished, which our protagonist in Elden Ring is a Tarnished. And just a little bit about that, and just putting the idea of, is the Tarnished undead, or what makes them undead is sort of something I've been going over. And that's what the Elden Wait is about, is what am I thinking about Elden Ring today? And what are you thinking about? Feel free to leave comments and topic suggestions, things you would like to talk about. Some of it may be covered in the Elden Ring so far, but this is also a good place to just chat, and I love the discussions that come up from the topics that we do. So, with that being said, I wanted to bring up a couple of quotes. And from here, and from interviews with Miyazaki, we learned that the Tarnished are those, so in the lands between, which is what the place where Elden Ring takes place is called the lands between, and there the Elden Ring and the Erd tree provide this like blessing to all the inhabitants, and it gives them this golden aura that is manifested in their eyes. And the Tarnished are those who have, for some reason, we're not sure why, they have lost the golden aura. They have lost this blessing from the Elden Ring and the Erd tree, and as a result, they were exiled from the lands between. And getting into this one detail I was going over, but I think is pretty set from these two, from the Bamco site, the story summary says, "And now the guidance of grace will be brought to the Tarnished who were spurned by the grace of gold and exiled from the lands between. Ye dead who yet live, your grace long lost, follow the path to the lands between, beyond the foggy sea to stand before the Elden Ring." This sounds like your protagonist is someone who was exiled personally. Like they used to live in the lands between and then they were exiled. The gameplay trailer transcript says, "The Tarnished will soon return, guided by grace once lost. The Golden Order is broken to its core. Foul Tarnished in search of the Elden Ring, emboldened by the flame of ambition, someone must extinguish thy flame. They will fight and they will die, in an unending curse, for how is as a champion or a lord to be born? Well, a lowly Tarnished, playing as a lord, I command thee kneel, brandish the Elden Ring for all of us." That sounds a little wacky because there's like 3 different voices in the gameplay trailer thing, so it makes a bit more sense. But from both of these it kind of sounds like you were personally the person, but in the Miyazaki interviews, for instance, with IGN, Miyazaki is in the article. It says that a quote from Miyazaki is that, "So the tarnished, you could call them tarnished individuals who have lost grace." And this was a long time preceding the setting of the game, a long time before. The ancestors of the characters that are present in the world were banished and exiled from the lands between these tarnished. So it sounds in this case like your character, the protagonist, is their ancestor was exiled and they're tarnished by maybe some sort of bloodline, and they they still bear that, but they're being called back, but they've never been to the lands between. And so this is something new. And in the Japanese, in the Famitsu article that was with Miyazaki, in the Japanese translation, it also says that Miyazaki refers to them again as a descendant of someone who is exiled from the lands between. So I think it is likely, given that it was in multiple interviews, and that despite my first impression, I think you are sort of a descendant of someone who is banished, and that's sort of interesting because that implies that the tarnished, there's something passed down through bloodline, and the idea of being tarnished is interesting because, as I'm sure we've all heard by now, pure gold does not tarnish. We learned that in Dark Souls 3 with those coins, and so pure gold does not tarnish. And it makes me wonder that if the tarnished, if there is gold that's tarnished, it's because there's some other metal in there and that's what's tarnishing. So it almost sounds like there's like some sort of impurity to the tarnished, and they're looked down upon by those who consider themselves more pure with it, and they were exiled as a result of that. But then shenanigans happened and they're being summoned back. But that means that whatever this impurity is, it's being passed down through the bloodline of the tarnished who were exiled to you as the player in the game who, it sounds like it was a long time ago. So hundreds, thousands of years, who knows how long have passed, but it still remains with you. And because you're tarnished, whatever that is about you, it seems like it still comes back. So it's not just something of the inhabitants where they were given this blessing and it's just like whoever was on the island. It seems like it's something core to all these inhabitants that they had this aura. And so if you're tarnished, there's still part of that aura, an impure version within you, and you're being summoned back potentially thousands of years after your ancestors were exiled from the lands between. So I find that pretty interesting. And the other part I wanted to discuss, and the part I'm sort of mulling over, I don't think there's an answer right now. And if I could have one digression for pre-release stuff, it's that there's no reason to try and solve the game right now or, to like figure out the story. For me personally, I think it's tantalizing to understand what is happening. And I think it's tantalizing because it helps inform themes like what From Software is going for with the narrative, and to get a good grasp on sort of what they're trying to do so that when I play the game, I have a fairly good understanding. And also, I just think they make really wonderful worlds, and the more time I can spend in these worlds, the better. But I don't try to come up with like, this is the answer, like just because sometimes there's just not enough information. But one interesting thing that I don't think there is an answer for yet, but I just want to throw out there to sort of mull over, is this idea of the tarnished being undead. And we know that it makes sense to be undead from a games mechanic standpoint because it explains like why you die, why you're not dead forever, and it has that integration of like the player experience is mirrored by the play experience, where you're not like your character is, you as the player have the same chronology of the character because they're actually dying. They're not going back in time and erasing that experience, in which case only the player is going forward, but it is supposedly that your character and the player are both experience the same events, the same losses, and the same victories. I like that. I don't think it needs to be in every game, but I'm curious here because um, in the Bamco site story summary, it says "Ye dead who yet live," and I believe that Japanese translation says it's like the same thing as undead for translations in Dark Souls. But I think they may have intentionally changed the wording here, just to give it a different flavor. But and then in the IGN interviews, they don't talk about any of the undead stuff. But then in the gameplay trailer script, they also say they will fight and they will die in an unending curse. For how else is a champion or a lord to be born? So this idea of continually dying, and I think here they are talking about the protagonist again, about the Tarnished, about how basically you'll struggle and you'll fail in this sort of unending curse toward power, but that it's by that cycle of failure and success that you become a champion or a lord. And I'm just curious with this game, and there's no conclusions right now, but sort of how they explain it or why you're undead. Because I think that's part of the reason I initially thought, oh, you're the same person who was exiled like hundreds or thousands of years ago because maybe you went into some sort of stasis, like a champion of Ash sort of thing, where like you've been chilling out dead for who knows how long, and now you've been awoken. But it seems more likely that you're like quote unquote like a normal person out in the world, and then the Elden Ring is shattered, and the and that triggers you to be summoned because of your tarnished bloodline, something along those lines. And I don't know if it is at that point that because of the Elden Ring being shattered that you are potentially undead, or if from like a narrative and a gameplay perspective, if it's something where once you arrive there, like at the beginning of the gameplay trailer, we saw our sort of maiden in black firekeeper type lady, and she puts a ring on your finger. So, and it seems like that's how you have your spirit horse. But also, I wonder if there's any sort of like nexial binding thing to this where you get to the lands between and now you're kind of stuck here for whatever reason. Like and death is not an escape for you anymore. Like you were mortal and now you're just sort of cursed to remain in this place for whatever reason. I'm curious how they explain that. I think that version is more likely because I kind of like the idea of this impurity or perceived impurity. Something, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they address like why did people become tarnished if that's something that gets addressed. And just this idea of then coming back, like this whole world, maybe you weren't even aware of the lands between, but then you're like called to it. It sort of has that like shadow over Innsmouth thing. You're just like drawn toward it, and it's because of your lineage that it's activated. Maybe your character was living a normal life, and all of a sudden they're pulled into this whole crazy situation because of their family history. I think that's kind of interesting, and I think in the interview, Miyazaki says that there will be other Tarnished too, and that they will have different opinions about coming here to become the Elden Lord. And some people aren't going to do that, and some people have different ideas and philosophies. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, if your family was kicked out of paradise, like when there was the full light shining down before the Elden Ring is shattered, and you had the greater will shining its light down, and everything was perfect. You get exiled because your eyes look a little different. Something's different about you. Your family's gone for thousands of years, and then you're pulled back, and by the time you get back here, it's because everything's shitty now. And I can see that some people responding violently to that and wanting some sort of vengeance against those who were otherwise blessed, and especially the powers that be and surround it, and probably those who had to do with the shattering of the Elden Ring, and those who hold the great runes now, which I suspect that the shattering probably has something to do with those demigod offspring of Marika as well. But that is another topic. But I just wanted to throw a few thoughts out there. um Curious to hear your thoughts about the whole undead angle, how that fits, because it's that was kind of like the main thing in Dark Souls is that you were undead, but this feels like maybe it's more like a Demon Souls thing where you're sort of trapped in the lands between once you get there, and or do you think that perhaps your character was not living a natural, normal life? We don't know right now. It is speculation, but we have enough here to sort of think about the possibilities, and I think that's a fun space to play in. So let me know in the comments what you think about that, or if you agree with what I've said. And I will see you for the next Elden Wait.